reading and discussion. And in connection with Brother Steve's talk, we're going to call Brother Regan to read Nehemiah chapter 6 for us.
Now it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian and the rest of our enemies heard that I builded the wall and that there was no breach left there, though at that time I had not set up the doors upon the gates. That Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, Come, let us meet together in some of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief. And I sent messengers unto them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease whilst I leave it and come down to you? Yet they sent unto me 4 times after this sort, and I answered them after the same manner. Then sent Sanballat his servant unto me in like manner the 5th time, with an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, It is reported among the heathen and Gashmu saith it, that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king according to these words. And thou hast also appointed prophets to preach of thee at Jerusalem, saying, There is a king in Judah, and now shall it be reported to the king according to these words. Come thou therefore, and let us take counsel together. Then I sent unto him, saying, There are no such things done as thou sayest, but thou feignest them out of thine own heart. For they all made us afraid, saying, Their hands shall be weakened from the work, that it be not done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. Afterward I came unto the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabeel, who was shut up, and he said, Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee. Yea, in the night they will come to slay thee. And I said, Should such a man as I flee? Who is there that, being as I am, would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. And lo, I perceived that God had not sent him, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me, for Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Therefore was he hired, that I should be afraid, and do so, and sin, and that they might have matter for an evil report, that they might reproach me. My God, think thou upon Tobiah and Sanballat according to these their works, and on the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets that would have put me in fear. So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month Elul, in 52 days. And it came to pass that when all our enemies heard thereof, and all the heathen that were about us saw these things, they were much cast down in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was wrought of God. Moreover, in those days the nobles of Judah sent many letters unto Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came unto them. For there were many in Judah sworn unto him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Aaron, and his son Johanan had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah. Also they reported his good deeds before me, and uttered my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to put me in fear.
Calling Brother Steve now to come forward and bring us his comments and introduction to chapter 6.
Espionage, conspiracy to commit murder 6 times, backbitings too numerous to even count, a massive building project completed, marriage out of the truth 2 times, and the God of Israel reigning supreme in the eyes of all the nations around about. This 6th chapter of Nehemiah has it all. I think chapter 6 could be summed up in the following words: determination and perseverance in the face of adversity from the world. But the world were not only on the outside. It wasn't just the ones that we read of who were coming in trying to prevent Nehemiah from building the wall. But it was from the ecclesia within as well. It would have been bad enough if Sanballat, Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian were the only ones against Nehemiah and his great work. But there were also Jews reporting to Tobiah and him sending letters back to them. Satan was against them from the outside, but Satan was also within the ecclesia. Nehemiah said, verse 3, when they tried to lure him away from Jerusalem, "I'm doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and come down to you?" And the exhortation here is marvelous. How many times have we been working in the truth and been distracted by something or other? Or by the world? How about working on an exhortation or a talk for the gathering, for instance? And we've had to leave it for something, some other pursuit, or distracted by something that is trivial in comparison. Why did Nehemiah have such determination? Because we're told earlier in the book that he had mourned, fasted, and prayed for those of the captivity and for the walls of the city to be rebuilt. And he had reminded Yahweh that Jerusalem was the one city that the Creator had chosen of all cities throughout the world to put his name there. He had made a covenant with his Creator, and he was determined to perform his duty. And once in a while we'll see a brother or a sister determined to carry out the work of the truth in some form, and they give it their all. And the exhortation is clear: we all need to be Nehemiahs, especially when it comes to the work of the truth and work within our own ecclesias. Now we can be Nehemiahs, or we can be Satan, and we will reap the appropriate reward either way. Now, an open letter was sent to Nehemiah the 5th time. This shows the character of the one who sent it. We know it was customary in those days to seal a letter, especially to a governor. In yesterday's chapter, Nehemiah had been declared the governor of Judah. When we mail letters today, we have the decency to seal our envelopes. Sending this letter open to Nehemiah was insulting. He was the governor. But as we know, the world are devious in their ways. This letter was opened so it could be made public, and not only used to strike fear into Nehemiah, but into the Jews, who would learn of the contents of this letter because of it not being sealed and being read, and that fear would be upon them too, and that they maybe would pressure Nehemiah into having the meeting with Sanballat and stopping the work on the walls. But as Nehemiah said in verse 2, he knew that it was more than just a meeting they wanted. Verse 2, but they thought to do me mischief. They thought to do me harm. Nehemiah was able to read situations very well. And he was able to read people even better. Verse 6, wherein was written, is reported among the heathen, and Joshua saith it, that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king, according to these words. And thou hast also appointed prophets to preach of thee in Jerusalem, saying, there is a king in Judah, and now shall it be reported to the king according to these words. They were trying to put Nehemiah in fear of rebellion against the king of Persia. You're making yourself king, and we're going to tell. This is a pre-echo of the accusation that the chief priests, the scribes and the Pharisees would use 475 years later. And our Lord would be crucified just outside of the wall of Jerusalem at Golgotha. Luke chapter 23, verse 2, we read, and they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King. But Christ was the King, wasn't he? In verse 10 of our chapter in Nehemiah, we read of another Satan in the form of a man named Shemaiah, who used more underhanded tactics and even more deception. Verse 10, afterward I came unto the house of Shemaiah the son of Delaiah the son of Mehetabeel, who was shut up. To understand who Shemaiah was, and to find out why he was locked up, we need to look back into the book of Ezra. Ezra chapter 10 and verse 18 we read, and among the sons of the priests there were found that had taken strange wives, namely, there's a whole bunch of names there, and as we continue into verse 21 of chapter 10 of Ezra, and of the sons of Haran, Maaseiah, and Elijah, and Shemaiah. And that was Shemaiah's connection with the temple that we read of in chapter 6 of Nehemiah. He was of the priests. And this Shemaiah had married out of the truth. Continuing in verse 10 of Nehemiah chapter 6, Shemaiah speaking, and he said, let us meet together in the house of Elohim within the temple, and let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee. Yea, in the night they will come to slay thee. And Nehemiah replied, verse 11, and I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there that being as I am will go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. Remember Joab? Fleeing for his life into the tabernacle? Holding on to the horns of the altar? How did that work for him? What a contrast we see between the characters of Nehemiah and Joab. But it wasn't just that Nehemiah wouldn't hide in the temple to save his life. Like I said, he knew people. Verse 12, and lo, I perceive that Elohim has not sent him. My God did not send him. But he pronounced his prophecy against me, for Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. When Sanballat's trickery to get Nehemiah away from Jerusalem to kill him had failed, they tried to lure him into the temple to kill him. Shemaiah, who was shut up, locked up in prison, I hope they locked him back up where he belongs. Now the walls of Jerusalem have been built and knocked down more than any other walls in history. The wall made of beautiful white Jerusalem stone had been knocked down for 85 years since the Babylonians came. And in only 52 days, 40 building crews had restored 3 miles of wall. It's estimated that the walls were about the same size in the days of Nehemiah as they were in the days of Christ. One can only imagine the mind of Nehemiah as he snuck out in chapter 2 in the middle of the night, and he saw the devastation as he rode out on a mule out of the valley gate. He rode along the south side of the wall, along the top of the valley of Hinnom. He turned the corner and he went up past the fountain gate. But his mule could not pass. The rubble from the wall was blocking his way, and he had to turn back. Enormous job, yes. But his faith was like that of David and Goliath. David, when he slew Goliath. And we can just imagine David jumping off the stage like Brother Dan yesterday, slaying that terrible giant. What relief it would have been for Nehemiah to pronounce the words of verse 15 of our chapter. So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month Elul in 52 days. Divine help was evident in this rebuilding project. Verse 16, and it came to pass that when all our enemies heard thereof, and all the heathen that were about us saw these things, they were much cast down in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was wrought of our God, of our Elohim. The enemy, the world, had lost faith. They had lost faith and their wonder. Now, I've done a few building projects in my time, and jobs that seem very large to me are really quite small in comparison to what Nehemiah had in front of him. It had to have been divine help. Psalm 126. When Yahweh turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. Then was our mouth filled with laughter, and our tongue with singing. Then said they among the heathen, among the nations, Yahweh hath done great things for them. Psalm 127, verse 1. Except Yahweh build the house, they labor in vain. And this is true with anything. If you want your wall built around your city, who are you going to call to do it? Are you going to call for a butler? Or are you going to call for Jackson, Redmond, experienced builders? It's obvious here that with Yahweh on your side, you can accomplish anything. Now we can't finish the comments on this chapter here this morning without covering the wicked deeds of the world addressed in verse 18. For there were many in Judah sworn under him, talking of Tobiah, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah the son of Ara, and his son Johanan had taken the daughter of Meshullam the son of Berechiah. Also they reported his good deeds before me, and uttered my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to put me in fear. Meshullam was again a priest in this chapter, according to the book of Ezra. He had given his daughter to Tobiah's son in marriage. Marriage out of the truth, once again outlawed by Yahweh during the time of Moses, and the principle is still the same today. That is, two priests, two men of God who should have known better in this chapter, who sinned by getting mixed up with marriage in the world. Shemaiah, who took the strange wife in the book of Ezra, mentioned in this chapter, and Meshullam giving his daughter away to the world. And just like in the days of Nehemiah, it still happens today. There's really so many things we can discuss in this chapter. Who exactly was Sanballat? What was he all about? Where was he from? Where did he live? Why was he so bothered by Nehemiah's efforts? What about Tobiah and Geshem? Just a few things for us to discuss in the few minutes that are remaining. Just like to say, give you some ideas here. Why is Tobiah's name, why does it mean the goodness of Yah? Sanballat, the Horonite. Horonite means ragings. And surely he raged against Nehemiah. And these are some things, brethren and sisters, we might be able to discuss as we discuss this 6th chapter of Nehemiah.
Thank you very much. Brother Steve brought out some really interesting and salient points for us to discuss. And we are running short on time, so I would ask that any of the brethren that have comments come forward with them as soon as you're able. We do have a roving microphone available. David.
I'd like to thank Brother Steve, and also take the opportunity to thank Brother Vegan for his comments yesterday, and they both sort of ably put us in the scenario that we have here with Nehemiah and the mammoth task that he had in front of him. It was once said to me that it's pretty easy to knock down things. It's very easy to sort of demolish a building, wall, whatever it might be. It's pretty easy to criticize brethren and sisters, pull things down, and if necessary, and that sometimes is necessary, and also sort of fight the fight of good faith in contending for the truth. That is sometimes a work which we may not find difficult. And Jehu was one such character. He had no problems whatsoever in executing the prophets of Baal and in bringing down all their altars and high places. But then, when it was left to him to build up the 10 tribes, he failed and actually apostatized himself. Nehemiah admittedly, it wasn't anyone within the truth who had pulled down the walls of Jerusalem, but nevertheless, the project he was faced with was rebuilding the walls. And as Brother Steve pointed out, he must have had a really sleepless night after taking his mule around the walls of Jerusalem, seeing all that rubble. It's one thing to build, it's another when you have mounds and mounds of rubble to clear away, and probably with very difficult means of transporting it and dumping it anyway. So he had an absolutely mammoth task ahead of him trying to build this wall, and as has been brought out and as we know, that task was made many times more difficult by the enemies without and the enemies within. And as Steve said, he had a very good sort of perception of people. He had a very good ability of foresight. And that is true, but perhaps some of that comes from his astuteness and his awareness of his duty to God. Because if you can imagine, someone who maybe is doing this half-heartedly may think, oh yeah, I suppose I can go and have a meeting with them. Nehemiah, his whole life's ambition at this point was to build this wall. He was not interested in anything else. And therefore, when someone presented something else to him, he may have stopped and think, wait a minute, I don't want to go and have another meeting. I have something more important to do. And then possibly may have led to him thinking, well, why are they even asking me this anyway? Why are they asking me to go meet with them? And realize that they thought to do him harm. So maybe the exhortation, I mean there's a lot of exhortations which have already been brought out, but maybe even on that point, that if we put the work of God first and foremost in our lives, our abilities of perception, our ability to see the flesh, what it really is, that ugly, hideous monster that we all are, we will be able to see those characteristics more ably and have the perception of faithful men like Nehemiah.
It's interesting that the enemies of Nehemiah started out feeling very complacent that they had, the majority on their side, that they had the connections, and they were pretty confident that they could stop this Nehemiah. And when he started to be successful, they were much cast down, it says, in their own eyes. So they began to realize that their underhanded ways and that weren't working, and they had nothing to fall back on. So Nehemiah really stands out as a true character and a true servant of God. He had the vision, he had the drive, he had the faith, and it gave him the confidence to put up with all these scheming people who were supposed to be on his side and weren't. Any other comments?
Just real quickly, just want to recognize that before Nehemiah, of course we know he had help years before that, but the people did the real building. Nehemiah was just a catalyst to bring the people together. Of course he prayed to God and he received help from that way. But please recognize that the people were all there before, and so it just took the efforts of this man to bring them together. And as our brother Steve so clearly put it, are we Nehemiahs or are we Satan's or adversaries to him? We each have the choice every day. Are we builders? Are we terror downers? Or are we just idly standing by? Thank you.
Any other comments? No. Very few minutes left.
I was just kind of thinking about the state of Jerusalem at the time that the Babylonian destruction took place and left it in this rubble. And here a great man has come back to rebuild. And sometimes we find our own lives in a mess like that. You know, our lives are just, may seem to be very destroyed, a mess. And the only way we can rebuild is to sort things out, figure out what's useful in our lives and what things are not, things that we have to get rid of and discard. And, you know, use the things that we can to rebuild and set our lives on track in the right direction and do things God's way. And so it's a very good lesson what we see in Nehemiah and the rebuilding of that work. It's a great work to do and it's tremendous. And sometimes we have to look at things like it's just such a big, you know, it may seem like such a big task that we may feel like we can't do it. But if we find ourselves in that position, you just take a little bit at a time, a piece at a time, something that you can chew until the job's done. And we see a great example of that in Nehemiah.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. You see the Sunday school students are arriving back. Just have, I'd like to thank the brethren for their comments. Just have a very few announcements, other than the fact that we're reconvening again at